I'm sure at some point you've looked for a good quote. Maybe it was for an Instagram post or a tweet, or maybe you were just looking for a good quote to inspire you. And most of the time, whenever I come across a quote, I'll think that it's really beautiful or really clever, but it doesn't really have a lasting impact on me. But then I came across a quote which really made me stop and think about myself. It was scary accurate, like I had just looked at my own reflection for the first time. And it was by Brené Brown.
Perfectionism is a 20-ton shield that we carry around to protect ourselves. What it ends up doing is prevents us from being seen and known by people.
I have never felt so called out from a stranger online before. I've spoken on this channel before about how I've got these neurotic tendencies, how I'm this massive overthinker, and how I'm trying to overcome perfectionism. And honestly, I just thought these were innate characteristics of mine. I thought I was just born this way. So even though I've been actively trying to improve on these things and change these things, I didn't really give much thought to why I was like that in the first place.
Here's what perfectionism really is. It's a way of thinking that says this: if I look perfect, live perfect, work perfect, I can avoid or minimize criticism, blame, and ridicule.
This all started out because I was a high achiever at school, and every time I did well in my exams, I would get so much praise from my teachers, my parents, my family, and maybe it's because I'm that stereotypical middle child that made me really crave that. And so whether it was as a student or in my jobs or in my relationships, I thought that I had to be the best that I possibly could be. I thought that's what self-improvement was about. I thought it was just striving for excellence. And I thought that's what everyone was striving for.
Perfectionism and healthy striving are seen as opposite ends of the continuum in the research. So over here you have striving for excellence, over here you have perfectionism. Opposite. Here's why. Healthy striving or striving for excellence is internally motivated. Here's what I want to achieve. Here's what I want to accomplish. Perfectionism is solely driven by this. What will people think?
Over time, my self-worth really became entangled with how well I did. I really looked up to characters like Rory Gilmore and Hermione Granger, and I wanted to be like them because I thought they were perfect. I put huge amounts of pressure on myself, and I became really self-critical.
When perfectionism is driving, shame is always riding shotgun. We struggle with perfectionism in areas where we feel most vulnerable to shame.
This need for perfectionism really began to spill over into other areas of my life, and especially when I went through friendship problems, I began to develop more insecurities which pushed me towards perfectionism even more.
We wake up in the morning and we armor up. And we put it on and we say, I'm gonna go out in the world, I'm basically just gonna kick some ass, I'm not gonna let anyone see who I am, and in doing so, I can protect myself against the things that hurt the most: judgment, criticism, fear, blame, ridicule. I'm gonna armor up and I'm gonna be safe.
I wanted to look like I was completely fine, that nothing was affecting me, but also I wanted to fit in. And I thought the way to do that was to be perfect. Whether that was the way that I looked or the way that I talked, I just wanted to do everything well.
I was so shocked to learn in the research that the opposite of belonging is fitting in. Because fitting in is assessing a group of people and thinking, who do I need to be, what do I need to say, what do I need to wear, how do I need to act, and changing who you are. And true belonging never asks us to change who we are. It demands that we be who we are. Because if we fit in because how we've changed ourselves, that's not belonging. That's not belonging, because you betrayed yourself for other people.
Ultimately, I didn't realize that by trying to be perfect, I wasn't being myself. It was a facade. I didn't feel like enough, and that feeling of not being enough didn't come from the outside world, it came from me.
Belonging is not something we negotiate with the external world. It's something we carry in our hearts. And as it turns out, that the men and women who have the highest levels of true belonging not only find sacred being a part of something bigger, but they have the courage to stand alone.
Now I realize that perfectionism is so toxic. It's the reason that I struggled as a nail biter, which is something that's associated with OCD. It's the reason that I've struggled with burnout, stress, and anxiety. It's the reason why I've had these sudden outbursts where I've acted so out of character, as if the part of me that's been suppressed was just trying to get free. And it's also the reason that I've been such a people pleaser and a bit of a doormat.
We try to combat not being enough by pleasing and performing and perfecting. We go through our lives trying to be who we think we're supposed to be, doing and saying what we think people want to hear, putting on whatever mask or face we think we need to put on for that moment. When we're pleasing and perfecting and performing, we end up saying yes a lot when we mean no. And we also end up saying no when we mean, oh, heck yes, I want to do that. We don't have those boundaries when we don't feel like we're worthy and enough.
I watch Friends all of the time, and I watch Monica, and she's actually one of my least favourite characters because when I watch her, I actually see myself and the things that I don't like about myself. And even though I love to embrace this feeling of self-love, I feel like that means actually loving yourself and not loving the facade that you've put on.
This is so hard. It's because, and this sounds terrible, but it's true. I think most of us move through the world looking for confirmation that we don't belong, looking for confirmation that we're not enough. And then when we hear a criticism, even if it's like one criticism in a stack of 1,000 great things, we're like, I knew it. I'm not taking the armor off. I'm not going to stop self-protecting. I knew it. So one of the things that I try to practice from the research, and it's hard, is stop walking through the world looking for confirmation that you're not enough and that you don't belong, because you will always find it.
I've really wanted to let all of that go and just be myself. And this YouTube channel has definitely been the basis of that, me trying to get back to myself, be myself, and show the world myself.
There was only one variable that separated the people who have a strong sense of love and belonging and the people who really struggle for it, and that was the people who have a strong sense of love and belonging believe they're worthy of love and belonging. What they had in common was a sense of courage. And so these folks had, very simply, the courage to be imperfect. They had the compassion to be kind to themselves first and then to others, because as it turns out, we can't practice compassion with other people if we can't treat ourselves kindly. And the last was they had connection, and this was the hard part, as a result of authenticity. They were willing to let go of who they thought they should be in order to be who they were, which is, you have to absolutely do that for connection. The other thing that they had in common was this. They fully embraced vulnerability. They believed that what made them vulnerable made them beautiful.
Brene talks about this concept of wholehearted living, which is when you're able to wake up every morning and think, no matter what gets done or how much is left undone, I'm enough. But saying you're enough is one thing, but I feel like actually feeling and believing it is another. I actually think it's a really difficult thing to be yourself in this world, let alone to feel like you're enough for it.
But we hate vulnerability because it opens us up to being hurt. And we think, I don't want to be vulnerable because vulnerability is the center of shame and scarcity and fear and anxiety and grief and disappointment. So I am going to armor up and self-protect. I'm not going to let people hurt me, see me, take advantage of me. The problem is that when we armor up like that, not only is vulnerability certainly the center of these experiences, it's also the center of these: love and belonging and joy. No vulnerability, no love, no belonging, no joy.
It's actually really easy to put on a facade. It's easy to carefully think about what you're going to say or do or wear. It's easy to look around at society and to think about how you're going to conform to it. But it's much harder to reject all of that. It's hard to be yourself in an authentic way, especially because we've grown up being influenced by so many things and creating false beliefs about ourselves.
I think the majority of us were raised with the belief that vulnerability is weakness, that it's best to armor up when we wake up in the morning, go out into the world, don't put yourself out there, don't let yourself get hurt, really stay closed. Because it's not worth the risk. But what's interesting to me, and what I think is the source of a lot of the problems today, is we were also mostly raised to believe that it was important to be brave. So here you've got this thing where vulnerability is weakness, but you need to be brave and courageous. So really the only thing that can fit through that gauntlet of you can't be vulnerable but you need to be brave is bravado. And I think the way we fake being tough in our culture today is we're super cynical, we're super critical of other people who are putting themselves out there. We make fun of things. That's how we fake bravery. But the truth is, when we asked people in the research, what is vulnerability? I remember sitting across from someone who said, it's sitting down with my wife who has stage 4 breast cancer and making plans for our young kids. Wow. It's calling hospice and having a conversation with them about my dad. It's the very first date I went on after my divorce. It's trying to get pregnant after my second miscarriage. Vulnerability is never easy and it feels terrible, but there's no evidence that it's anything but courage.
I've really learned that being authentic shows up in pretty much all of our choices. It's choosing what we want to do for a living, how we decorate our apartment, how fast or slow we talk to other people, what we decide to wear, where we decide to eat, what we decide to stand for, and whether or not we express it.
I thought going into it, there were authentic people and inauthentic people. I did not find any evidence of that at all. What I found is authenticity is a practice, and you choose it every day, sometimes every hour of every day. And it's a practice. It's not, I just wake up and, hey, I'm authentic. It's that when you walk into a meeting, you have to make the choice. Am I gonna show up and let myself be seen? Am I gonna raise my hand and say, wow, y'all look super excited. I don't know what in the hell you're talking about. I'm so lost.
It's not easy, but I'm learning to value being real over being liked. I'm learning to be authentic by being more vulnerable, and YouTube videos like this is definitely a result of that. I'm trying to let go of what I think I should be, and I'm trying to just freely be myself. And I do feel like being yourself is freedom. But since none of us are perfect, being yourself does mean also being acceptable to being imperfect. But something that I found is that being yourself shows that you value yourself. It helps you to build your feeling of self-worth. And I also feel like it really helps you to connect with others.
If we're going to find our way back to each other, vulnerability is going to be that path. And I know it's seductive to stand outside the arena because I think I did it my whole life and think to myself, I'm gonna go in there and kick some ass when I'm bulletproof and when I'm perfect. And that is seductive. But the truth is, that never happens. And even if you got as perfect as you could and as bulletproof as you could possibly muster, when you got in there, that's not what we want to see.
When I was at university, I had this constant facade up, and because of that, I feel like I really struggled to make friends. I didn't let anyone see me. Nowadays, as I'm showing my vulnerability a lot more, I feel like I've connected with so many more people.
And this is the passage that changes my life. It's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done it better. The credit belongs to the person who's actually in the arena, who at the best, in the end, knows the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails daring greatly. So the moment that I read that, I closed my laptop, and this is what shifted in me. 3 huge things. First, I've spent the last 12 years studying vulnerability, and that quote was everything I know about vulnerability. It is not about winning, it's not about losing, it's about showing up and being seen. The second thing, this is who I want to be. I want to create. I want to make things that didn't exist before I touched them. I want to show up and be seen in my work and in my life. And if you're going to show up and be seen, there is only one guarantee, and that is you will get your ass kicked. That is the guarantee. That's the only certainty you have. If you're going to go in the arena and spend any time in there whatsoever, especially if you've committed to creating in your life, you will get your ass kicked. So you have to decide at that moment, I think for all of us, if courage is a value that we hold, this is a consequence. You can't avoid it. The third thing, which really set me free, and I think Steve, my husband, would argue has made me somewhat dangerous, is kind of a new philosophy about criticism, which is this. If you're not in the arena also getting your ass kicked, I'm not interested in your feedback.
Have you ever just come across people who seemed really extroverted and really authentic? They're just so comfortable with who they are, and it just seems like they don't care what people think. I thought that was my answer. I thought I had to just stop caring about what other people think. I would read books like The Subtle Art of Not Giving a and I thought, okay, this is the answer, this is what I need to do. And that's advice that we're often given, but I think I was really missing the mark with it.
When you don't care at all what anyone thinks, you lose your capacity for connection. When you are defined by what people think, you lose the courage to be vulnerable.
It's not about not caring about what other people think, because we as humans will always care about what other people think. We were born for connection, so we will always care about other people. But the secret is to think about the right people.
The question becomes the dilemma. If we have to care what people think, but we can't be defined by what people think. So what's the solution? My answer is that you get a very small piece of paper. I suggest 1 inch by 1 inch. And on that piece of paper, you put the names of people whose opinions actually matter to you. And so I carry my list with me. I have a little I do, I carry it in my wallet. And on it are the people whose opinions of me really, really matter. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So when I'm walking my tightrope of, I do care what people think, but I don't want to be defined by it. So there are people whose opinions of me matter.
For sure.
So the people on my list, and the people who I think should be on everyone's list, are the people who love you not despite your vulnerability and imperfections, but because of your vulnerability and imperfections.
I've got to be over this, but it's still hard because we are neurobiologically hardwired to be in connection with other people. In the absence of belonging and love, there is always pain and suffering. And so sometimes, I'll speak for myself, but this is true in the data, we lose sight of what belonging really means. And we steamroll over the people in our lives who love us for who we are to try to get the acceptance and approval of people we don't even know. It's like, I'll be getting dressed to go like to the mall and I'll say, hey, Steve, how do I look? I mean, I've been with this guy for 30 years. And he'll be like, you look beautiful, babe. I'm like, shut up. You don't know.
Like Brene, I call myself a recovering perfectionist because it's not something that's easy to let go of, and it's something that I have to fight against.
Hi, my name is Brene. I'm a recovering perfectionist. I mean, no judgment at all here on the perfectionism thing.
Even now, it still shows up in areas of my life. Like, I recently got married, and straight after the wedding, I went into perfect wife mode, especially based on what my cultural expectations are. But ultimately, I know that overcoming perfectionism is the right thing to do. I know it's a journey, but I also know it's a necessity. It's going to help others see me, but also help me see myself. It's going to help me live in a wholehearted and real way where I can really connect with other people. And that's what life is about.
Yeah, I'm just a normal. I think we're all kind of ordinary people. I get to do extraordinary things, but I think we're all ordinary people. But I think sometimes this world is tough because we shame and diminish ordinary. Mm-hmm. Ordinary lives or small lives. You know, we chase extraordinary moments instead of like being grateful for ordinary moments until hard shit happens.
Yeah.
And then in the face of really hard stuff, illness, death, loss, the only thing we're begging for is a normal moment.
Imperfections are not inadequacies. They are reminders that we're all in this together.